Hello, church, and welcome to another installment of our series called Faith Journeys. This is a series where we learn about the faith of various members of our church. Today, we are blessed to have Mr. Roger Brimley. Roger, welcome to our group today.
Thank you.
Roger is very familiar with you probably know him very well. You see him all the time. He is our keyboard player. Would you feel more comfortable if you sat over there?
Not really, not when I'm by myself.
Okay, all right, just checking, just checking. So one of the things that's also you may or may not know is that we're here in the church. Roger used to live here, but not in the actual church, but in the house that was on this very property. So, Roger, tell us about that house and what the property was like prior to the church being built, and kind of how that went down.
Well, actually, I only lived here for about 5 years. It was my grandparents' farm.
Okay.
And the Brimley family had settled here back in 1890 or so. They
All right.
originally settled over on Lennon and what do I say, Elms Road.
Okay.
That's kind of where the Fix are at.
All right.
Now. Originally when they came from New York, and then Charles Brimley, my great-great-grandfather, moved here. Moved here probably about 1890, from what I understand.
Uh-huh.
The church, actually, the sanctuary, there was a large barn. There was one large house. Where I grew up my first 5 years was a large old family farmhouse.
Okay.
And then next to it was actually my grandparents' house.
All right.
But they had the original farmhouse was divided into two pieces, and they rented it out. So my dad, mom, and I, lived there my first 5 years.
All right.
Before we moved down the street about a block.
Okay.
And so... Yeah, I used to play in the big old barn was here with the haylofts and everything else. In fact, I'm guessing about where I played down in the sanctuary was about where we swung from hayloft to hayloft when I was a kid.
Okay.
We also had, there were chickens. It was a pretty large farm. I mean, by the time I was living here, there was about 80 acres left.
All right.
Because the freeway cut off part of it. So
okay.
When I was growing up here, the property went all the way back to the freeway, even where those condos are at
Okay.
now and so on.
All right.
And there was fields. They grew some crops. There were sheep just to the west of the property, across the little creek out here, was where the sheep were in the orchard. And I used to get in trouble because I'd chase the sheep and all that kind of thing. I think I'm still grounded for life from what I remember.
Okay. I've never gotten in trouble for chasing sheep in my entire life.
I got the lecture about how they break legs and all that kind of stuff.
That explains a lot.
We also had what we called a granary barn. It had 2 levels, and later on, he didn't have as many chickens and didn't use the upstairs. So when I was in high school, we put together a basketball court upstairs.
Oh, okay.
So my brother and some others would come up here, and other kids we hung around with, and we could play basketball in the winter. It's kind of an up and down roof, so you couldn't do too many 3-pointer shots from outside or whatever.
Okay.
And we won't get into the fact that we used to have to clean up the floor because that's where the cats hung around.
Right.
So before we played,
Okay.
that was
Good.
kind of messy.
Yeah.
But we called it the granary, and we used to play basketball. I still run into guys that remember playing basketball up there. But there was still a barnyard here, basically. The older farmhouse where I lived my first 5 years was torn down very shortly after we moved out.
Okay.
So all that remained then was open property right in front here, and then my grandparents' house, which was right next to where the west entrance is at.
Okay. Yep.
And then they were there till I was in high school, and then my grandmother passed away when I was probably still in junior high, elementary, whatever, and then my grandfather passed away. I think I was almost ready to turn 16 when he passed away,
Okay.
as I remember.
All right.
And they were members of this church, so I actually have been going to this church, I'm guessing since I was born. I can only remember back to maybe 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
Of course, at that time, the church was over on Moorish Road,
Right.
before they came over here in the 70s.
Right. Yep. So okay. Well, I think that's kind of neat. Not everybody in this church can claim that.
Well, I've always
that's
told
neat.
every minister that if they see me daydreaming and falling asleep at the keyboard, I'm merely reminiscing about the old days from when I swung
Right.
the left to the
I
left.
gotcha.
So.
That's good. That's good. So now one of the things you are most involved with here is our keyboard player for the praise band and on other services and everything. So when did you start getting into piano? Did you have piano lessons growing up? How did you get, so musically talented?
Well, good old mom, back when I was 9 years old, suggested maybe I should take piano lessons. I don't remember her forcing me into it, but I do remember taking them, and I took them uptown here with Mrs. Prowse.
Okay.
And of course, her daughter still goes to the church here, Ross Hamady.
All right. Yeah,
So I took
know her.
them from 9 to 14. But when you get about 14 years old, it's sports time.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of the buddies, in fact, a couple I hang around with to this day, weren't real impressed by the fact I was taking piano lessons. So I quit when I was in 8th grade, I think, before going into high school and getting into sports.
Uh-huh.
Fortunately, I kept playing without anybody knowing about it. I used to say I went in the closet with it, but that developed connotations.
Right, okay. Yes.
So anyway, I stayed with it and just kind of played as a hobby at home, once in a while a wedding here or there, but then what really amplified the playing, and I've learned a lot, of course, the last 10 years or whatever since I got with the praise band. And that came about, I think Peggy Grant was playing at the time, and
Right.
of course then she had a daughter, and
Yeah.
at the time somebody needed to come in and take her place, and so that's when I got into it. And shortly before that, Eileen Faith was playing and wanted to find somebody
Okay.
to split time with her at the services. So actually I had started playing for the services
All right.
before that, back in 2006, 2005.
Okay. Well, we're thankful that you do that because you're a very important part of our group, and we love
I
having you.
appreciate
No
that.
doubt about that. So, and you also coordinate all of our, you coordinate what the girls tell you to
Yeah.
coordinate. So
I pick the songs, then they tell me
if those
I'm
were
picking the
okay or
wrong
not,
ones or
right?
not.
Yeah, no, I know. But that's okay. It's a great team. We work well together, and we're having a lot of fun.
Well, that's
So
probably the biggest part of when you talk about playing is we have just a great group.
Yeah.
When I come in here, everybody just gets along.
Yep, it is enjoyable.
Any group you're in, you like to have
Yeah.
that feeling.
It really is good. So I want you to think about this and think about the growing up here, being a part of this church forever, using your skills and talents musically. How has those things all together helped to impact your faith journey with Jesus Christ?
Well, I firmly believe that, I hate to pick on a church or another church or whatever, but I firmly believe we're here to create an environment of heaven while
Okay.
you're here.
All right, yeah.
I mean, our goal is, of course, when you pass away, you've lived the way you should, and
Uh-huh.
you believe in Christ, and you go to heaven. But I believe while we're here, we're supposed to create that
Sure.
environment, whether it's music or whatever. And for me, it's partly music. I mean,
Uh-huh.
I feel part and closer to God when I'm playing,
Yeah.
and I hope what I'm part of is doing that for everybody else.
Mhm.
So, and it's not just music. Anything you do, I think when you're around people, you should be creating this environment for people to feel peace,
Sure.
feel heaven, whatever you want to. I bring this up only because I remember it was actually in men's class, and my own youngest daughter brought it up one time.
Uh-huh.
They were bothered by, somebody can sin and do all these things their whole life, and if they sincerely on their deathbed confess,
Yeah.
they can still go to heaven. That doesn't sound fair. I go, I think it's fair completely, because if you've created the environment you should in your relationship with God your whole life, you've enjoyed that for
Mhm.
your 70 or 80 years, where that person has only enjoyed their
Okay.
experience on life for that brief
Yeah.
moment.
Uh-huh.
So it doesn't matter to me, and I'm not here to judge them anyway.
Right,
But
right.
I think while we're here, we need to create that environment that we all can enjoy
Mm-hmm.
and be at peace with.
Yeah.
Enjoy it with other people that have the same beliefs,
Uh-huh.
and so on. So for me, that's just kind of my little.
Yeah, that's a
my
great
little thing.
perspective.
And
That really
I
is.
hate it. I alluded to other churches because I've been in other churches where they're grim and Firestone and preaching the gospel and so on, and then they'll say, "Wouldn't it be great if we could all die tomorrow and get to heaven?" I don't believe we're here hoping we can die as soon as possible to get
Yeah.
to heaven. I
Yeah.
honestly
Okay.
believe we're supposed to fulfill a purpose here,
Uh-huh.
make a beautiful world for people around us, if you want to put it that way.
Right.
And then we enter into heaven at that stage in life when we no longer have our purpose here.
Agree. I think that's very good. And so I want you to know that with your keyboard music, there's no question in my mind that you do contribute to that creation of a heavenly environment in this church. And I know people value that and appreciate the work you do. So I'm very thankful for that, and I'm thankful for your perspective today.
No problem at all.
So that concludes our episode tonight with Roger, and we hope that all of you enjoyed hearing from him and hearing a little bit about how heaven is coming to our church through his music, and hopefully even some new ways that you might think about how you can help create heaven here in our church and in our world. So thank you for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll see you soon.